does.
Okay.
In the top right of your window. Yeah.
Or the host can physically go through and the host can physically do
I
it.
can't get it.
All right, going on with our roll call. Teresa Dunphy.
I don't know, Brian. If I knew, I'd be on it. I know I'm on Zoom. I can see them, and now I have this meeting, and then I don't.
Okay. If someone could mute Teresa because she's in the car, but if I do see her on the call.
I'm trying, but she's one of the many Rachels. I'm not sure which one.
Oh, okay.
Keep going. I'm sorry about this, Mark.
Sebastian.
Here.
Maxwell Johnson. Mark Boyce.
Here. Sorry. Here.
Richard McDaniel.
Hello?
Okay. Peter Ray.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, who is that?
That's Teresa.
Okay. Richard Powell.
Can you hear me now? This is Teresa.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Just keep your video on so we know to rename you.
That important. Our American values are on the line.
Richard McDaniel, Elise.
There's been so much unrest.
Okay, and Conrad.
I'm here.
Okay, please make sure that when you are not speaking, that you are muted, and when you are off, when your microphone is on, please make sure that TVs and other noise-making devices are off around you, because we can hear this, and they will be part of the public record since this meeting is recorded. Are there any members' names that I did not call?
Yes, Elizabeth.
We did, but you're one of the 3 incarnations of Rachel. So as we know,
Oh, I'm one of those.
Okay. As a reminder, please respond to the TRAC quorum notices within 48 hours so that we know who will and will not be in attendance. With that, we'll move on to item number 3 in our agenda, and that is the chairperson's report. In the interest of time, I will briefly mention topics that were covered at the August PSTA board meeting. The board approved a contract to replace the AV equipment, general training services, armored car services, and the new appointment of Elise to the TRAC committee. An amendment to the Forward Pinellas agreement, terminal shelters, bus purchases, and the Clearwater Ferry Service contract was also approved. They also received an update on the budget for fiscal year 2025. A final vote on that budget will be taking place next Wednesday at 6 p.m. at that meeting. One last thing I will add in from Car Free St. Pete is that they do have World Car Free Day coming up on Sunday, September 22nd with a scavenger hunt in downtown St. Petersburg, those who would be interested in participating. And FDOT is actually in the process of pulling numbers about the Reimagine 175 project in downtown St. Petersburg. With that, we'll now hop over to Elizabeth, who will give us a Forward Pinellas report.
Okay. Chelsea has been working so hard, and she says that changes come in daily. So that's why, even though I sent you the email, she's got 1 more month to spend with us, and then it's going to wrap up. And these plans they're going to be till 2050. So that's long term. They mean long term. A lot of years till 2050. And she talked about how she goes to people and has meetings. There's not a meeting that people come to because it's easier to get people where they're at, like Kiwanis and Rotary and smaller municipalities. They have meetings there. Right. And for example, she'll say, people have made it clear they want to use their golf carts. And Chelsea said, okay then, what lane do you want to give up in order to dedicate it to golf carts? And all the people said, oh, you mean we have to give up a lane? Guess we don't want golf carts then. So that's the kind of thing, back and forth, getting what people want and then outlining for them what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. And on 66th Street, you can't take away a traffic lane just for golf carts. Nobody wants that. So that was an interesting example that she had. And then there's another email I sent about Safe Streets, and the money, $400,000 was found for Safe Streets, and then another $559,076. Doing my math, I think that's about $1 million. So safe streets are very important for Pinellas. And I know there's somebody on our TRAC team, I think it's Mark, that's paying attention to Safe Street. He just gave us an update on that. So that's a lot of money. That was pleased to see that. I was pleased to see that. And then there's a line in one of these emails that I really like. It has to do with how Fort Pinellas is cooperating with the SDA when it says it is being developed in partnership with the Pinellas Sound Coast Transit Authority Community Bus Plan effort. So that means it's a good feeling to know that they're working together so tightly. Sister organizations. They've got the land use and the transportation, and then PSTA is obviously the transportation. So it's always a fascinating meeting. And that's the update.
Okay, thank you so much for that update, Elizabeth. I also wanted to add that I believe the Safe Streets Committee is also, it was awarded to 49th Street South from 1st Avenue South down to 25th Avenue South in Gulfport, and more work will be done on that to do a little traffic calming, and I believe that also we will hopefully see in the community bus plan revised bus routes on 49th Street South. Gloria, you have your hand up?
Yep, and that's in the email that Bob sent to you guys, that I got from the meeting, gave it to Bob, and Bob put it out to you guys. And it describes just what you're talking about.
Yes, all right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Before we go to Gloria, I'm just going to ask everybody, including the auditorium at PSTA, if you are not muted, please mute your device at this time. There is a lot of feedback, and it will help with the smooth running of this meeting. Whoever's in the auditorium, there we go. Okay, Gloria, you have your hand up.
Yes. I wanted to add on to what Elizabeth talked about, because I was at the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee for Forward Pinellas on Monday, and then today was the local coordinating board, and so I got to see that same presentation that she talked about that Chelsea gave with the long-term planning, and there were some really interesting pieces that I wanted to share with you, and that is that they did a whole lot of research. They did focus groups and went to, like you said, locations and talked to consumers. And a couple pieces of information that I thought were fascinating is they said only 20% of the people they spoke with, of a representative sample, these were statistically valid samples, would never use transit, which means that 80% of the people would in fact consider using transit if it were convenient, if it worked in that given situation. I think it's so important that we keep telling the county commissioners and everybody that the transit is not just this little group of people, but that in fact a large number of people are amenable to using it if it works, if we put it together in a way that works for them. And so there was a lot of other information like that, but I thought that was a very important thing to remember, that the people that are anti-transit are not.
I'm joining. I'm here.
Yes, Gloria, we also had that same conversation come up at the Car Free St. Pete committee about what would replace 175, and all these great ideas came up for like a monorail, a trolley, and all this other stuff. And they kept coming up and they started brainstorming, and I, at the end had to be, there's no funding for this. I had to tell them, like, FDOT is controlling the money, so we have to, get them on board as well. So they are, it's countywide. We do see that. Okay, thank you everybody for a wonderful Forward Pinellas update. And with that, we're now going to go to today's information item, which is a electric bus presentation from Henry Lukasik.
Well, good afternoon, members of the TRAC committee. I see some new faces here, so I'll quickly introduce myself and then we'll get right to our presentation today. Thank you, Chair O'Hara. My name is Henry Lukasik. I am the Director of Maintenance for PSTA. I oversee both fleet and facilities. And today, for some of you, this might be the first time that you're seeing some of this information. For others that have been on the TRAC committee for a few years, it will be an update. And this will be about all things battery electric buses. I want to thank Bob Lasher for inviting me to make this presentation today. He took the liberty of compiling many of your questions that perhaps have come up over the past several months or even year. So that's pretty much what this presentation is based around. And so sit back, put yourselves on mute, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my screen off for the benefits of those that only have the ability to see the presentation. And so let's get started. Bob, go ahead. Next slide. So obviously PSTA has several different types of buses that you may have been on. And our oldest buses go back to 2005 through 2009, and that's been the workforce of the fleet for many, many years. I do have some good news as we go through the presentation. They are, of course, diesel, and as you can see from the presentation, there's nothing special about them other than they're diesel. Around 2009, PSTA made the decision to purchase its first hybrid electric buses. And when we go through these, and you're going to kind of see an evolution of how we went from diesel through hybrid and then our transition to all electric. So our first hybrid electric buses were known as split parallel. And before I go any further, I just want to say I'm going to keep the technobabble jargon to an absolute minimum, okay? But if I find myself going off into the weeds, please, one of the Rachel Capolas that are on the meeting today, please just say Henry, my best. Dual split parallel are my best. Dual split parallel are kind of like your Toyota Priuses. So you have a small engine and you have batteries on board, and the two work together to make the bus go forward and backwards. The other benefit that the batteries had was a lot of belt-driven accessories that you find in your car, like your power steering pump or your AC for your air conditioning, all driven by belts and pulleys. That's when we started seeing what were called electrified accessories. Those were all being powered by batteries now. And we'll talk about the benefits of electrified accessories. For many years, we purchased those parallel hybrids. They're still on the roads today. You can recognize those buses as, say, they start with 10101 and they go all the way up to 16109, I believe. There's 59 buses in our fleet. And for the most part, most of our buses in our fleet are made by the bus manufacturer called Gillig. And of course, we have a couple of others, which we'll mention, the hometown trolleys, which you see in your upper right on our beach routes, and the 8 cutaway. We call them cutaways. Those are the small vehicles that you see generally up in North County sometimes. In 2017, we still purchased hybrid electric buses, but it was the next generation of hybrid bus. That's what we call a series hybrid. And what that means is it still has a small diesel engine and it has batteries, but the engine does nothing to make the bus move forward or backwards. The only thing that that engine does is basically act as an electrical generator to power the high voltage batteries on top of the roof, along with electrified accessories. So if you were to look under, say, a Sunrunner bus, as you can see, a Sunrunner bus is a series electric, you would see an engine, but the engine is not directly connected to a transmission. It's just one massive generator or alternator, perhaps, okay? Now, one of the other benefits of a series electric hybrid, okay, is that, yes, it does have two capabilities that the other buses do not have. One is kind of like in an automobile, when it comes to an intersection, the engine will shut down. We call that stop-start, so that it's not sitting at our very short interval intersections in Pinellas County for 7 minutes and consume diesel fuel. It will actually shut the engine down. You won't notice the difference other than perhaps it being a little quieter on the bus. The other thing that it has the ability to do in certain locations is that it does have the function to travel under all electric power for a limited duration, right? It's not a total electric bus. It can go maybe perhaps a mile at about perhaps 35 miles an hour, and then the engine will come back on. So that was, we like to say it's kind of like an electric bus, but with its own onboard charging system, because that's what the engine does. All right, now, let's talk about our transition to all-electric. Bob, next slide, please. Okay, for those of you that have been a longtime rider for PSTA, you will remember back in 2018 when we got our first two all-electric buses, and they were from a company called BYD, now called Ride. They did very well. 2018 seems like a very long time ago when it comes to all-electric anything, all right? A lot has changed, and when you see our new Gillig buses, which are currently, we've got 8 out in service, we'll talk about some of the fundamental differences. 2018, we purchased our first two. 2020, we purchased another 4. There's a total of 6. Their range is about 150 to 180 miles, and we're going to talk about what goes into impacting range. For the record, as perhaps some of you have seen, we are currently under a rebranding effort at PSTA, so these buses don't look like they do in the picture anymore, and our new buses have that nice two-tone blue color now, with a white top and PSTA up at the front, at the roof cap. And I got to tell you, I've heard some from other transit agencies across the country, and they all talk about how great that new look is. So that's really great that we've changed that up. Bob, next slide, please. All right. In 2021, as part of a 5-year capital replacement plan, because as you know, 2005 and 2006 was a long time ago for buses, and they were getting tired, and we needed to come up with a plan to replace those. So we presented an action item to our board in December of 21 to purchase 60 brand new buses. And we chose the all-electric buses, and that really marked a significant investment in brand new vehicles for our passengers, more so than has been seen here since 2007, 2008. If you were riding PSTA from 2006, 7, and 8, there would have been lots and lots of brand new buses. And we're finally at a point where we can retire those buses. they've gotten all we could out of them. Next slide, please, Bob. All right, so here's the fundamental differences between the BYD buses and the Gillig buses. First and foremost, double the battery capacity. So when we talk about range on all electric buses or all electric vehicles for that matter, we have to talk about the total amount of onboard battery capacity. And the way that is measured is in kilowatt hours of capacity. So you don't have to actually know what makes up a kilowatt hour. Think of it as like your fuel tank in your car. It's like gallons of fuel, whether you got 15 gallons, 20 gallons, 150 gallons. The more you have on board, the farther you're going to be able to go and the longer the bus will remain in service. So let's do a couple side-by-side comparisons. So the BYD buses had 302 kilowatt hours on board capacity, which really was what drove that 150, 180 miles of range. These new electric buses have 686, so almost double the capacity. And that's why you see the range is almost, in some cases, doubled. It's now got a capacity to travel 230 to 270 miles on what we say is a single state of charge. What that means is bus goes out at 100% state of charge, like a full fuel tank, and comes back at about 10% in case of a car, like an eighth of a tank of fuel, and you can get that range, 230 to 270. Our original order was for 62 of these brand new buses. Like I mentioned before, we have 8 in service. As I look out my back window here, we have another 6, which we look to deploy mid-October. We're going to take a little bit of a break in manufacturing, and from October all the way to the end of January, Gillig will fire up the production line once again to run off another 24 buses, and those should be being delivered about one a week starting late November and through January. So we're going to have a lot of work here after the holidays, what we call in maintenance, turning the buses around, which is just another name for getting them ready for PSTA service. They come from the factory with a lot of the onboard components that you see and use every day, fare boxes, the real-time, the Clever Vision screens, but we still have to go through and program those and install a couple other things once they're delivered to get them fully PSTA ready. Okay, Bob, let's go next slide, please. So this is how our fleet's going to change. What you see on your left is a pie chart which shows our current fleet type. So 51% is still diesel. The number in parentheses is the total number. And hybrid makes up 43%. And of course, we've got the 12 electrics currently in service. You see that it's only 6%. If you look to your right, and what we call future fleet, that's really going to be in the next 2.5 to 3 years. So if I have the opportunity to be sitting here talking to you at the start of 2027, it seems like a far way off, but actually it's really not in terms of time. You're going to see our fleet become mostly hybrid and electric, and the diesel will go down to 14%. Those 28 vehicles that you see as diesel is going to be the 20 trolleys that we have and those 8 cutaways that I mentioned earlier. Don't feel bad if you can't say you've ever seen one of those cutaways. There's only 8 of them, and they really only just do a certain thing. Now, as you can see, comparing the left pie to the right pie, you kind of see that our fleet is going to be balanced out. Not all one particular type of vehicle. Not all electric, not all hybrid, not all diesel. And that's pretty much a good thing. Keeping your fleet balanced out with different types of propulsion technology doesn't corner you into a specific type of vehicle. As much as we like to say that, you know, the supply chain and things don't go wrong out there with trying to get parts and technology on vehicles, because even today's diesel engine is very technologically advanced. We kind of spread that out a bit so that if we can't find some certain parts on a hybrid vehicle because there's a long lead time to get them, well, guess what? Those parts are not on all electric vehicles. I can tell you, just as an aside, getting replacement engines when it's time to overhaul hybrids or diesels is taking a lot longer than expected. We plan for that, of course, to minimize the downtime. But as we all know, with electric buses, they don't have engines, so we don't have to worry about that problem. Bob, next slide, please. I often get asked a lot of questions. Do electric buses save any money? And if so, why? So as you can see on your screen, we call it an electric bus dividend. And a lot of times we get asked, hey, an electric bus doesn't consume diesel fuel, so how much diesel fuel are you saving on an annual basis per bus? And as you can see, one retired diesel bus saves a staggering 10,500 gallons of fuel a year that we're not going to use. And if you multiply that just for what we'll see in FY25, with 20 new electric buses in service, that is almost close to 250,000 gallons of diesel fuel that we're not going to have to purchase or use, right? So for the benefits of not utilizing fossil fuels, to not, polluting the environment, to just not using diesel fuel, that's quite a significant, and that's what you see the breakdown in front of you. That will be an estimated fuel savings for FY25 of $546,000. That is not a small piece of change right there. We get asked many times in maintenance, are electric buses easier to maintain? And the answer is yes and no. So any new vehicle, you go out and buy a brand new car today, and it would obviously be a lot different than a vehicle that you probably had perhaps in 2005. I know this because I still drive a 2005 Ford Explorer, okay? And I can tell you, except for power windows and a 6-disc CD changer, okay, it can't even compete with an automobile from today. So the technology is very different. But the maintenance staff here has had a lot of experience with maintaining what we call high voltage propulsion vehicles. If you remember me talking a few slides ago, with PSTA purchasing its first hybrid electric buses in 2009, that's when the maintenance department started getting its experience with batteries and high voltage components. It is true that hybrid vehicles that we have share many of the same components that our all-electric buses have today. So we developed a great foundation so many years ago, the training, the tooling, the special equipment, the knowledge to maintain these buses. That factors into maintenance savings. Here's the other thing we talk about with electric buses that results in savings. A typical diesel bus, like one of our 2006s, with an engine and a transmission, has over 10,000 individual components that can be considered as a wear item. Means it can wear out, whether it be an injector, a piston, a ring. Since electric buses don't have those components, there is a significant cost savings because you just don't have to maintain it anymore. It doesn't exist. The other analogy that I use is if you have the benefit of having to mow your lawn and you're deciding on what type of lawnmower to buy, electric or a typical gas push mower engine, and an electric lawnmower has a motor, a battery, and a blade. And some wheels and some other stuff, but that's about it. When you look at that cheap gas-powered push mower, you've got an engine with a spark plug with an oil filter and an air filter and a whole bunch of other components that you have to service and maintain all the time. So which would you choose? The one where you just push a button and go and replace a blade and a battery once in a while? Or are you going to sit there every year and service your gas-powered lawnmower? That's where that savings comes in. Now, as many people like to say to me, now, Henry, electricity isn't free. And you're right, it isn't free. We do have to pay for electricity. But the cost of electricity is substantially cheaper than a gallon of fuel. So when you look at this chart, there's the fuel savings of $546, maintenance savings of $336. The cost of $330,000 is taken away from that. So you have a net savings of $552,000 a year just with 20 new electric buses in service. Multiply that very quickly by another 40, total 60, and you'll see a substantial savings. I know that was a very long discussion on savings of electric buses. So, Bob, let's hit a new slide. Okay, what goes into factoring the range of an electric bus? And these are all of what can impact range, what type of route, how fast it goes, traffic conditions. Does it have hills? How many people are on the bus? How hot is it? We're going to come back to that. Driving style, it is true. 40% of how far an electric bus can go is dependent upon how the driver operates it. I can tell you our safety and training department has rolled out training to all of our operators on how to drive an electric bus effectively. We may have some refresher courses because not every operator of the 400 or so that we have has been driving an electric bus. We only have currently 12 total in service. So once we start getting more and more in service, many more operators may need to go through a quick refresher. Of course, how old the batteries are on board. We all know that if you have a cell phone, when you first buy it, that battery seems to stay at 100% for a very, very long time. 5 years later, you're wondering why it only lasts you half the day. It's called battery degradation. And then, of course, route profile. I can tell you, and I tell many, many people when I give this presentation outside of PSTA, because they're all interested and curious, is that Pinellas County, Florida, has one of the best operating environments for all of these factors you see on your screen, more so than other places across the country. For example, it's not too hot. We think it is, but it's not too cold. All right. Batteries like to operate in a consistent environment. All right. No major extremes from one end or the other. We don't have very big hills like, say, in San Francisco. We don't have, it's not 40 degrees below zero. At least we hope it never becomes that way here. Now, we know it's hot here, but let's talk about that ambient air temperature. And I want to talk about something, two things that are on our newest electric buses that you may find cool. I use the word cool. Get it? That's supposed to be funny.
I got it.
Thank you, Bob. So we all know in the hot Florida climate that we need to run air conditioning. And yes, that does require power, so that does have an impact on range. One of the one of the things that we've done is wire the windows blue on our new electric buses. And if you were able to catch CEO Brad Miller's latest email blast from Friday, you may have seen a short video explaining our new thermo-shielded windows, which are on these electric buses. So basically, I urge you check that video out because there's me giving a real quick talk, and visual is much better than me talking through it. In between the layers of glass for those windows is a piece of material that blocks ultraviolet light, which causes heat. Think about your home, right? You have a big window, you're standing next to it, and you just feel sometimes the heat coming through the glass, right? So in our buses, it blocks that ultraviolet light, which blocks a lot of the heat from coming into the bus, meaning the air conditioning doesn't have to work as hard, okay? And when the air conditioning doesn't have to work as hard, that just means we have more range. The other thing that we have on all of our new electric buses is UV air treatment systems. If you kind of look in the back, please don't look completely up in there, but if you quickly look back, sometimes when the sun goes down, you'll see that it kind of has a purplish hue. That means we have ultraviolet C air treatment systems, which kills mold, bacteria, some forms of viruses, but it means that we're treating that air as it's coming out. Let's go to the next slide. I got 47 more slides to go. Okay, we're going to go through these real quickly. I want to show you a real quick behind the scenes as to what the maintenance department and some of our safety protocols. I do get asked this question. High voltage experience, you heard me mention that earlier. Maintenance department has a combined 65 years of experience working on high voltage equipment. Our fleet technicians are constantly being trained on the latest safety and repair procedures for these vehicles. And of course, our maintenance department is certified by Gillig to diagnose and repair these vehicles. It's like if you took your vehicle to the dealership for warranty, right? Who better than the dealership, especially if it's under warranty? Well, in the bus world, there's no Gillig dealership in Pinellas County, like they're Ford or Chevy or Toyota. They're out of California. So when you have this credential, you're able to act on behalf of the manufacturer. We fix it, they basically reimburse us. Bob? I'm going to go through these very quickly. Safety protocols, because a lot of stuff is now located on the rooftops of buses. We have scaffolding for fall protection. We require 2 technicians called the buddy system when you're working up on the interior battery compartments, and it really is for that third bullet. Electricity, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you're certainly going to feel it, okay? So again, safety is our number one motto here at maintenance. Bob? A lot of special equipment that's needed. Lineman's gloves. Again, what you're going to see in the next few slides. Yep, keep going, Bob. What you're going to see in the next few slides is a lot of the special tools. Lineman's gloves. Keep in mind, a lot of the tools that we use are the same tools that the linemen for, say, Duke Energy you see using out there. Insulated tools, insulated pliers, all to protect from being shocked. And of course, these all go through rigorous testing and recertification to make sure that they are safe. Those lineman's gloves that you saw in the previous slide must undergo mandatory voltage testing every 6 months. Again, if you're going to put your hands into a protective piece of equipment like gloves, you better make sure that they are sound. Next slide, Bob. Of course, your biggest friend here is the digital voltage meter. Whenever you work on electricity, whether it be a vehicle in your home, the number one thing that you must confirm each and every time is what? 0 voltage, right? You replace that receptacle in your house, 0 voltage. And that's what we use these tools for. Bob? lockout, tag out. OSHA requires it. Law requires it. We require it. Basically what it means is if it's disconnected, you put these protective covers over it, you lock it. The person who locked out the equipment takes the key so that no one can come on later on and accidentally reconnect it because they didn't know. Safety, safety. All right, we don't have time for a break or a stretch, so we're just going to carry on to the other side of electric bus, and now we're going to go into the infrastructure and what we've been working on for the past year and a half here. So, as you know, this is an aerial view of our bus yard and our whole entire campus, and we're going to focus in on the right-hand side of your screen, which is where the buses are parked every night. Go ahead, Bob. Couple of questions that we needed to answer once we knew that we were going to be getting electric buses is how we were going to charge them. How many? How are we going to do it? What type of equipment? So the answer to that is we are installing currently right now 60 200 kW depot chargers. This is known as the depot, all right? In transit, we call it the bus lot, the bus yard, you know, the campus. Many places call it the bus depot, depending upon where you're from. These are plug-in chargers, so that's known as conductive. So when you make a physical connection to something, it's conductive. There's a wire connected to something else. I know some of you know about our inductive wireless charger. We've got a segment on that later. That's known as inductive. There is no physical connection to recharge the bus. It's done over the air. We'll get into how that works. And of course, what are the electrical requirements? Can our facility handle charging the buses? Well, this facility was built in 2005, and here it is 2024, so we needed to make some improvements, some upgrades to our electrical infrastructure. Go ahead, Bob. And most importantly, can your electric utility support your electric bus project? I can't tell you, I've heard some stories of a few transit agencies across the country that answered question 1 and 2, no problem, got the buses, installed their chargers, but never asked question 3 until the absolute end of the project. And they called up and said, hey, Mr. Utility, we need all this power. Do you have it? And the utility said, no. And that's not good. So we asked this question over 10 years ago, I imagine. Can Duke Energy provide us, we gave them a scenario, hypothetically, hey, in 10 years, if we had all these buses, do you have the capacity in place to support them? And the answers were resoundingly yes and yes. And that's very important for us. And I have to mention, Duke Energy has been a great partner for us throughout this whole endeavor, even with our first 2 all-electrics, all the way to when we'll have close to 70 plus electric buses. Go ahead, Bob. All right, this was a conceptual that we built, I believe 3 years ago, to just kind of show folks what was the installation of 60 new chargers going to look like in our bus lot. And I've got some better pictures of what it actually looks like, but this was to help visualize the amount of infrastructure that needed to go in and how we were going to place it in the yard. Go ahead, Bob. So our first plan was to go, again, back to our board and say, we need to install these chargers. And phase 1 was adopted in 2022. And that was for the installation of 12 chargers. I can tell you that those are now up and running. That was completed last year. About a year ago. Go ahead, Bob. We'll show some pictures. This was the layout that we chose. I know it's going to look strange in the next 2 or 3 slides as to why they seem to be checkered all over the parking spaces, and those green X's represent the placement of those chargers. Bob, next slide. Here's some photos of phase 1 in various stages. I want to point out a couple things. So the picture to your upper left is an electrical transformer. You may see these outside your home or apartment, and they look like just little green boxes on the side of the road or perhaps in your yard in an inconvenient place. When you get up to the amount of electricity that we need, you start getting into much massive transformers. And this transformer is a 2.2 kVA transformer. As you can see, it needs a crane. It's the biggest electric transformer that Duke has in its inventory. Again, I'm not going to get into the technical babble, but let's just say that it is probably about 700 times the electrical capacity as that little green box that sits on your front lawn, okay? If you go all the way to the right, all right, you're going to see what looks like a big gray cabinet. Think of that as the circuit breaker panel in your home. Now, typically, an apartment or a home may have a 150 amp or a 200 amp. We call it a service. That's what the panel's rated for. These big gray cabinets are 3,000 amp. So there's a big jump between 200 amp and 3,000 amp. Now, each one of these big green transformers and these big gray cabinets can support 12 chargers. So yes, if you do the math, Henry said that we're installing 60. So does that mean, Henry, another 4 more of these big pieces of equipment are going in? And you'd be right. Bob, let's go talk about phase 2 if we can. Here's some other pictures of phase 1 before we get to phase 2. Point out a couple things here. On your left, we call that the dispenser. Why? Because it kind of looks like a fuel dispenser. It's not. It's an electric dispenser, and the thing plugged into it is how you hook it up to the bus, which you can see on the further right picture. What are the gray things in the middle? So those are known as the power blocks. That is what gives it the 200 kW capacity to support. As you see, it takes 4 hours to recharge one of our newest buses. Inside that gray box are 4 modules, okay, for lack of a better term, and each one is rated at 50 kW, okay? When you add them all up, that equals 200. Now, for those thinking, well, Henry, can you technically charge 4 or 5 other buses even if it's just at 50 kW? Yes, we could. We just need a few more dispensers for each bus. Bob, next slide. Phase 2. Phase 2 is the installation of the remaining 48 chargers. So as I mentioned before, there's going to be another 4 of those big green boxes and big gray boxes. And those are all going to be completed probably by the end of this calendar year. And of course, we want to thank our federal partners at the FTA that make things possible every day for us when it comes to these projects, such as buying buses and in this case, our charging equipment. Go ahead, Bob. This is what phase 2 is going to look like from a cartoonish point of view. As you can see, the parking lot is going to become littered with chargers. And again, they're checkered like that, and I'll spill the beans on why that is. It's for redundancy, which is, so as many of you may know, each one of our buses has assigned parking space. So each bus has an assigned charger. The reason why they're checkered like that is because if the charger that's for that bus goes down, the charger that's in the adjacent parking space can actually reach over and charge the other bus, right? We'll just borrow the charger from the other bus's parking space. The reason for that is because each one of our buses has 2 charge ports on it, one in the front and one in the back. Next slide, Bob. Okay, I took this from a remote location, secretive at PSTA. No, I'm not standing on the roof, in case that's what you're wondering. But this was progress as of about a week and a half ago. And you can kind of see, especially when you go back and zoom in after the presentation, what it looks like in real life. You see, we're all the way up to chargers 48 right now, and they're working on the last 24, saw cutting the parking lot. You can kind of see on the right and left, they're working on what we're calling equipment island out there. I want you to kind of notice something. You don't see any power lines, do you? No overhead power lines. Everything is undergrounded. So we don't have to worry about hurricane force winds, knocking over power lines. And everything is rated to be outdoors. Bob, next slide. Okay, are we doing okay on time, Bob?
Yeah, doing fine. It was
Okay,
scheduled
I'm
for
really going to
5:30,
touch
and this is fun.
5:30? Okay. I'm going to touch real quickly on inductive wireless charging. So if you were with us, how many years ago, Bob? 2018, 2019?
Yeah.
On our BYD buses, we talked about the inductive charger, which lives out at our lay-by, and it's still there. It does function, contrary to some rumors out on the street that it's broken. It's not broken. What's going on is that if you've noticed along, what is that? That's 34th Street, that there's been a lot of overhead power line work. Duke's putting up a lot of new state-of-the-art poles. And so they had to disconnect our electrical transformer that powered our inductive unit until the work is completed. If you notice, there used to be a pole out there with the transformers up at the top. Well, the pole is now gone because everything's kind of either going high in the sky or it's going underground. So we're waiting for them to wrap that up. But it's not broken. Inductive charging, I won't get into the scientific of it. You probably have seen these on much smaller devices, such as those pads that you can put your cell phone or device on. You don't have to plug it in. Another great is, does anybody have an electric toothbrush? You just put it on the little base station there and magically it's charged. That's inductive charging in the simplest, smallest form. Now, if we switch the slide, Bob, go one more. There we go. I like this. Nope, one back one. I like this graphic. Nope, next one.
Okay.
There you go.
That one?
Yeah.
Or do you want the
This
the
one.
bus?
This is the other cartoonish figure I have here. Okay. So there is a big difference between charging a toothbrush or an iPhone Droid. I don't care. I'm not particular to any brand of device. Than it is a bus. There's a lot more horsepower involved in terms of electricity. So typically, okay, give or take, that charge pad for your device is generally probably around 65-ish watts. Okay, a watt, like a light bulb, is measured in watts. All right. The charge pad that we have for the bus is 250 kilowatts. You got to multiply that by 1,000. That's a lot of watts. All right. And as you can see, there is a charge pad in the ground, which we call the primary. There is a receiver plate that is mounted underneath the bus. So when the bus pulls over the charge pad, okay, that through the excitement of electrons, through magnetism, all right, that generates electricity through the air. Now, a lot of people say, Henry, obviously, that can't be very efficient, right? What's more efficient than just plugging it in, because it's connected together? And the answer is the technology has come a long ways. You are still correct, but what we call the efficiency loss, because you're charging over the air, is only a degradation of about 6 to 8%, right?
Wow.
All right, next slide, Bob. And for those that have not seen our lay-by, this is what Google Earth makes it look like. We're not really allowed to fly drones too high here due to the close proximity of the airport. So this blurry image is Google. Not bad. And as you can see where the electric bus is in this photo, that's where the charge pad is. And if you ever wanted to know what was behind that architectural fenced-in area, that is the actual charging equipment for the inductive charge pad. Go ahead, Bob. Oh man, it just seems like we're never out of hurricane season. Here we are. It's well, we probably got what, a month and a half left to go, and so far so good. We had a little scare there with Debbie, but certainly, if you remember and have been a longtime resident of Florida, Pinellas County, everybody remembers the 2020 hurricane season. Man, there just seemed to be so many named storms, they ran out of names that time. And of course, last year, we were pretty much on scare with Hurricane Ian. Unfortunately, it missed us and did a significant amount of damage down in the Lee County, Fort Myers area. But the question I bring this up is to really talk about, some myths, rumors, legends about electric buses, hurricanes, kind of serve as a refresher. What does PSTA do during hurricanes? What is some of our standard operating procedures? So let's get into that with the next slide. I threw this in here just kind of as a reminder as to what the categories of hurricanes are. I'm sure everybody knows that, what they are. Obviously, Category 5 is the worst. As a anecdotal aside, I heard that perhaps NOAA, or the National Hurricane Center, is contemplating creating a Category 6, just because hurricanes seem to be getting much more larger in terms of wind and just force of nature. I haven't yet, but still, Category 5 is pretty much where we're at right now. Hurricane Irma, at least when it hit us in 2016, somewhere around there, 17?
18, I think.
18.
Or it was 18.
I believe that was a strong Category 4 at one point. And by the time it made it to us, it was a 2 or a 3. And we did okay here. What does PSTA do? Well, first of all, like everybody, we monitor the weather. If our safety and security director here, he'd tell us that we have EOC staff by our own people. We're there with everybody else from the county. And of course, if we go to the next slide, Bob, one of the most important things we do is when we get activated by the EOC, we certainly go into assistance with doing evacuations to storm shelters. We start with the A's, the B's. We take our direction from EOC. Until such time it's no longer safe to do so. Once evacuations conclude and we get closer to the storm, all right, then we start looking at, well, what's the impact of the storm going to be? And then if we need to, for example, during Irma, as you can see from the star, we're very, very, very close proximity to Tampa Bay. And when they were predicting a 32-foot storm surge, we got a little concerned here at PSTA. So we do have SOPs that we use that if we do believe that our bus lot will flood significantly, standing water, that we will move the entire fleet off-site to a safe, secure location, much higher ground. Put a pause in that for a moment. You can leave it on this slide, Bob. So obviously, if you've never seen what the bus lot looks like emptied, that's what it looks like, okay? And then we move our buses to a safer, higher ground. I won't share that location, Perhaps some of you already know what it is. Keep it to yourself. I want to talk quickly about electric buses and water and all that other stuff. So obviously, being a vehicle, an electric bus can drive when it's raining out, okay? It can drive through a normal amount of water on the street. I'll preface by saying you should never submerge any vehicle, okay? If you've watched the news lately, especially in the Carolinas, or at least from some latest footage as when Debbie came through, you saw a lot of submerged vehicles. You should never do that to any vehicle, electric, diesel, hybrid, in any case. So when we say electric buses can't drive through water on the road, that's not necessarily true, or else no vehicle would be able to drive on the road, okay? What you're not supposed to do is submerge them, and it's not really because of a lot of the electrical components on it. It's really because on every vehicle, especially buses, they share a lot of components with the braking systems, the lubrication systems, wheel bearings. You shouldn't submerge any of that in water, all right? Our chargers. So you're probably saying, Henry, it's great you move the whole fleet off to a higher location, but what about all that stuff you're installing in the parking lot? What are you going to do with that? Well, the good news with that is, okay, that the chargers are rated to basically sit in 18 inches of water. You notice they're all on pedestals, so there could be 18 inches of standing water in our parking lot. All right, standing water, not a surge, but actual standing water, and those chargers would be okay because they're rated to be outdoors. The components inside them are corrosion resistant, and they're all weather resistant as well. Some cases they're waterproofed. Now, in any case, if we were under the threat of flooding in this yard, and we of course would turn the power off to them all, right? We don't want to have them live, so because water and electricity don't mix in that case. All right. So that's why in the previous slide we would do a proactive electric shutdown of those chargers. Now, let's say that there was 27 inches of standing water. First of all, that'd probably be a Category 5 hurricane. If we were in 27 inches of standing water, I don't think anybody would be going anywhere for quite a while. All right. Now, if that did happen here, we would still do the proactive charger shutdown. Fleet would be moved off site. Okay. Those silver boxes you heard me mention about called the power blocks, we would pull each of those power blocks out. We would let the site flood. We would come back once the water's receded, dry everything out, inspect each component, and because we had the most critical component in storage, safe and sound, okay, when everything was checked out, dried out, we would go ahead and re-energize and bring stuff back online. And of course, once we brought the fleet back, we would service our evacuation shelters with rides back to people's previous locations. Bob, I think that's the last. Oh, closing comments. So here's where we are right now. 62 battery electric buses are on order. 14 have been delivered so far. Those are new. Our charger installation project is going very well. Phase 1's completed, up and running. Phase 2 should be completed end of year. Great mix of different propulsion types in our fleet. And you heard me mention that Pinellas County is well suited for the operation of battery electric buses. We're very experienced in doing so, both from driving them and maintaining them. Our electric utility is fully got us covered. And if you haven't heard the latest news, PSTA was successful in being awarded a FTA Low-No grant to purchase more electric buses and hybrid buses. It's already old news, so it was 12 electric and 9 hybrid buses, but we just got notice today, and you can catch us at the October board meeting where we asked the board, or we asked the board, but we also informed the board that FTA has approved us to purchase a 13th electric bus. So now it'll be 13 electric buses and 9 hybrid electric buses. And what that'll be 21 more new buses on top of the 62. So I don't have a calculator in front of me. Yes, I do. 62 plus 22, that's 84 brand new buses in the next 2 to 3 years. And I'm going to make one last statement is there hasn't been that many buses at PSTA since 2008. And one of the metrics that we use here is average fleet age. Currently, right now, as of today, the average age of our fleet is 11.85 years old. 20 calendar year 26, 27, that'll drop down to 6 years old. So we're going to have a nice newer fleet. And this is really going to impact our passengers. People will notice many more new buses in the new branding image. And so very excited about that. That's the last slide, I believe. I know I took up an inordinate amount of time, but there's just so much to cover. And I appreciate you giving me all the opportunity to speak to you today. And I will turn that back over to the chair.
All right, thank you, Henry, for that wonderful presentation about, us using more electric buses here at PSTA and how it all comes to life. Do any of the committee members have any questions? Gloria, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Henry. It sounds so exciting. The couple questions I have are there any in North County yet? And if not, when will there be some? And then that's my first question. My second question is, they're not, you can hear a bus coming. You can hear a car coming. I know it's always tough with electric cars. You don't hear them. Is there a risk from the electric buses being too quiet so pedestrians don't hear them coming? And then the third question I had deals with, I've heard, a lot of misinformation undoubtedly about how, oh no, it's so dangerous, that we're going to electric cars and electric buses, that all the ingredients are, that all the materials they're using are specialty chemicals, specialty, needing all kinds of special mining issues and so forth. Is there an awful lot of sort of scare stuff going out about electric buses? Those are my questions.
Okay, first question regarding buses in North County. I can tell you that because I live up, I live on the furthest outskirts of unincorporated Pinellas County, known as Tarpon Springs. But I think you might be speaking about the McBowen Booth area, perhaps up there. Okay, so the answer to your question is we have been running electric buses on our 19 route. I believe that's what it is. I see them every day. And the great part is they love that route. They do exceptionally well on that route. Really the answer to, and the other route is the east-west route on Ulmerton. I can tell you that, Gloria, it really is just a question of there's only 8 in service, but I can guarantee that once we have close to 70, 75 in service, the answer is yes. We're not putting any restrictions on where they go. Thank you, Mark. Okay, noise and quietness. I've heard this quite a bit. Yes, electric cars are very quiet. I can tell you that electric buses, they are quieter, but they're not completely soundless. So, obviously a very large vehicle traveling down the road with the size of the tires makes quite a bit of road noise, and the air conditioning systems, while electric, are not completely quiet. So I wouldn't say that I've heard reports of many issues where the bus is so quiet that you can't hear it. Certainly, it's a much quieter. Well, to the future, I can say that at Grand Central Station in the future, it will be a lot quieter on the platform hub, which everybody will love. Ingredients, battery technology, forests coming down in the Congo. Here's that is a very, very much larger discussion to be had. My answer to that is, everything comes at a price, okay, with what we do on this planet, right? Whether you're mining for precious metals, whether you're drilling for oil, everything has a price. The plastics that we consume in our bottles, so on and so forth. I can tell you that one of the largest ways that lithium is produced, and I assume that's what everybody's talking about, is mining for lithium. Lithium is actually done through salt brine marshes. Mining is still being done, but salt brine marshes, that's where a pretty decent portion of lithium is produced from. And I will say this about batteries. Just like the battery in your car, okay, or the battery, you need a new battery. What do you have to do with the old one? Trade it in, right? It's because it's recycled. So when we overhaul batteries here, we recycle those to people who want those precious metals back so it can be reused again. I can also tell you that our battery life here is exceptional. So our buses are typically rated, we run our buses for 18 years, right? When people ask, when do the batteries need to be replaced? I can tell you generally we're getting 8 to 10 years out of them. So it's a long-term return on that particular component. I think I got all your questions.
Thank you.
And I will agree that, at Grand Central, Platform A, which has bus 11, comes up, and the bus comes up completely silent. Right next to it at Platform B is Route 52, and I call that bus the Growler because it is loud when it comes in and out. So it's like seeing the best of both worlds, what we have for the future and what we've had in the past. And, especially when we get the new Clearwater Transit Center and Route 52 can have a more energy efficient bus on it, we'll really have the benefits of it at Grand Central. I remember when we did the interview that at Park Street that I said that, this is a system-wide event that's going to help because the buses run from Clearwater to St. Pete. So even people in St. Pete, like yours truly, can benefit from a new transit center. Anyone else have any questions for Henry regarding electric buses?
I do. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
This is Sebastian.
Mhm.
Mr. O'Casey, I have two questions for you. How much do these new electric buses cost?
Great question. They cost $1.2 million. However, the buses, just like everything else, due to inflation, have not been immune. I can tell you right now, the next question may be, how much is a hybrid electric bus? It is approximately $200,000 cheaper than an electric bus. And then the next question may be, well, how much is a diesel bus? And I can tell you, it's probably close to $950,000. the cost of a bus in the last 10 years has risen dramatically. There is no bus that we would use here at PSTA, okay, that really is any cheaper than $900,000.
This money is coming from the government, correct?
Yes, sir. Federal Transit Administration.
I'm in awe of you. What's your background?
My background?
Yeah,
Well, how far do you want to go back? I've been in public transit for 25 years, 11 of which has been here at PSTA. Previous to that, I was at a transit location up in Connecticut. And if you want to go even further back, I grew up on a farm in rural Massachusetts on the western side, because not everywhere is Boston and Massachusetts.
well, obviously you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're really here to serve our passengers to the best of our ability. And I'm excited that there's just going to be so many new buses for folks to get on. And I appreciate everyone's patience with especially being on our growlers. And
all right, let's go to Mark Boyce. He has his hand up.
Mark, did you
Mark,
have a
you're still
question?
muted.
I'm sorry. I was curious about the buses you said were going to retire, like 2606, for example. I ride that one quite a bit on the 59. Are we disposing of them, or are we going to keep them around for spares, or?
no, we're not. We are going to dispose of them. If some members recall, PSTA was fortunate enough to be awarded some Volkswagen settlement money from Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Google Volkswagen Settlement Fund if you're not familiar with what that is. The disposal requirements for vehicles that are purchased with that funding are very particular. We must punch a 3-inch hole in the engine, and we must permanently disable those buses, never to be used again. So 20 of those buses will be disposed of in that manner. The remaining buses, if they're running, which most of them by that time are not, would go to public auction. And if they're not roadworthy or there's nothing salvageable, they go to a scrap salvage yard. I will mention this, that when all these new buses come in, every bus from 2005 to 2009 will be retired. So the only buses that will be out in general service will be from 2010 to present day. So the blue and white buses will be gone.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. I don't see any other hands up, so thank you, Henry, for that lovely presentation. Very, very detailed. I can tell you're very passionate about the work that you do in our fleet maintenance department.
Thank you. Happy to come back anytime.
All right. I want to take a moment and recognize our newest member, Elise. If you could come off mute and introduce yourself real quick.
Hi, my name is Elise Prophet, and I go to the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and I'm currently the campus lieutenant governor. And so I kind of wanted to represent my campus and our experiences with PSTA and provide also my own personal student experience. So thank you.
That's wonderful. We're very glad to have you on the committee.
And if I can just add, I'm sorry, Mark.
Oh, no, you're
Elise,
fine.
You are now our official student representative replacing Sean Schrader. It was going to go to Michaela Badilla, but she resigned from TRAC yesterday. So we're going to elevate you, and you're the official student rep. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. That's great news.
Congratulations. With that, we're now going to move into member comments and questions for staff. Again, this is the time when you can ask staff about what you have seen out while you're writing PSTA. I have two questions, and I'll make it real quick. The digital signage at Grand Central, is that going to be replaced, or is it just going to be phased out because now everybody has cell phones?
I'll take that one. That is going to be phased out.
Got it.
That stuff is so antiquated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's obsoleted.
And one more question, then we'll go to Mark Boyce. I see that some of the buses have the new electronic signage instead of like the dot matrix kind of signage at the very front of the bus, but it says waiting for information from driver. Are they not fully functional at this point in time?
Keep reporting those instances. That is not supposed to happen. And every time we get a report, we look into that and we correct the issue. Like all technology, sometimes there's a glitch. Also, as I'm aware of it, if you are having a problem with the Wi-Fi on our buses, okay, because all of the modems and cellular equipment was upgraded to 5G capability a year and a half ago. We wrapped up that project, okay? If you are having problems with Wi-Fi, okay, please communicate your name, okay, the bus or buses, the date, what type of device you have, okay, so that our IT department and the complementary department in maintenance vehicle technologies can diagnose the issue. Without that information, we have a very tough time pinpointing whether it was a local outage, because again, all this Wi-Fi is provided by a cellular connection, okay? Was it a local outage? Was it a single outage? Or do we have a much bigger issue that we need to investigate?
Okay. So just to clarify about the new digital signs on the buses, if it's not giving next stop, saying what the next stop is in how many minutes, just like it does on the Sunrunner, that means it's not functioning properly, correct?
Right.
Thank you.
For that particular bus.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. All right. Mark Boyce, come on in.
I had two more questions. Number one, are we buying anything except $1.2 million electric buses at this point, full size, or are we buying some small vehicles as well to take care of the small routes?
Well, our new hybrid electric buses are 35 foot, so that's with our low-no application. We're always, depending upon the type of service that's being planned, we look at the size of the bus. So we're always looking at the right vehicle for the right application.
Right.
And we also have a lot of useful life left in our cutaways, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lots of useful life.
So are we going to replace any of those?
Not for another 7 years.
Okay. So we won't have the capacity to add a small route to anytime soon. We're just kind of going to patch up the old ones for 7 years, and then we'll probably replace those with electric vehicles of some sort, I assume.
In 7 years, I really couldn't look that far out. I couldn't say if they'd be electric, diesel, hydrogen. I really wouldn't know.
Well, we're not buying any more diesel full-size buses, right? Because we're punching holes in the ones that still work. So I wouldn't think we're going to.
Well,
Volkswagen won't allow us, right? They want us to punch holes in those too, so they have a captive audience.
Well, safe to say that when PSTA retires a bus, that it really needs to be retired. We run them for no less than 18 years. They have well over 1.5 million miles on them. They really need to be retired. So there really isn't anything salvageable on that.
How about 2606? Is that one unsalvageable?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't know, but I can certainly look.
It's incredibly smooth running bus. That's why I asked. I said that to the driver a few weeks ago. I said, "Man, this thing runs good." And we had a ridiculous amount of miles. I don't think it was 1.5 million, but there was an 06. It was still perfect. It, make me sick to punch a hole in it. But and I just have some of them are junk. The seats are disgusting and so forth. That kind of thing. I didn't want to put money into an old thing, but when you've got a truck, when you've got a bus like that, I can't imagine punching holes in it. But
well, let me alleviate your fears. I fully agree with you. I could have a whole other track presentation on our disposal methods here. We are not punching holes in brand new engines. Okay, recon.
I didn't think they were new.
We take those engines out of vehicles that are retired. We put them in other 2006 model buses because I still have 3 years to go before all of these new buses come in. So one of the things that we need to be cognizant is of, I don't want to be sending new parts to a salvage yard. I also don't want to carry a lot of new parts inventory for vehicles that are going to be retired out. So we're kind of in a wind down process over the next few years. But when the average miles of a transit bus at PSTA is 60 to 65,000 miles a year, yes, we will take those engines out of those vehicles and repurpose them.
Awesome. Yeah. You guys are doing a fabulous job in order to keep it running like that. That particular bus I just happened to ride it frequently, and it's just amazing how well it runs. But at any rate, thank you very much. And can I just make sure I understood? It was Volkswagen who gave us the grant. They're the ones that required us to punch holes in the old stuff, or
yes, the Volkswagen.
And Volkswagen had that kind of clout because is the buses we're buying, is that a division of Volkswagen? Is that why?
No, I think if you go to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, search for VWS settlement. There's a great FAQ. It is way longer to explain than what we have time, but you should get your questions answered there.
All right, thank you very much. Given that it's beyond 5:30, we are going to have to call for the end of the meeting at that time. If you have any questions, I'm sure you can be more than happy to reach out to staff personally, and they will be able to help you out with all of that. Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting, and we'll see you for our next one in September.
Thanks, everyone.
Aye.